life just overwhelms you sometimes. I just lost my way and lost my common sense and my judgment.
That was ex-attorney Marc Dreier talking about losing his way in a new thought-provoking documentary called Unraveled. I'm Spencer Mazyck, and joining us is the film's director and producer, Marc Simon. He is also an attorney who worked at Dreier's law firm for 6 years before it collapsed. Welcome, Marc. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get to the film, which I have to say it was very well done, by the way, I want to ask you about your experience at Dreier's law firm as an associate. Would you have considered him a mentor while you were there?
If I had been sitting here one day before I learned about the collapse and the crimes he committed, I would describe Marc Dreier as loyal, supportive, and absolutely as a mentor. I have an entertainment law practice now in large part because of the support that I had received from him as an associate.
So you had a close relationship with him then?
I did, especially as a young attorney. I think most people in the firm would tell you, out of any young attorney at the firm, that I certainly had the closest relationship with him.
So did you ever suspect any foul play about the way he ran his operation before the collapse in 2008?
No. I mean, again, he was someone who was loyal, who was a mentor, so the thought that he would cross over the line into criminality was the furthest thought from my mind. We did think, when I say we, attorneys did notice. You couldn't help but notice the high lifestyle he lived, both personally and the firm itself had a lot of lavish items, whether it be art or nice furniture. And it was a discussion point, but...
Sort of like, how can we afford this, or...
and what we thought, or what I thought in talking to some of the more senior attorneys, was certainly the firm might have been highly leveraged, he might have had loans, and that he was a risk taker, but never would I have imagined that he was breaking the law.
So how were you personally impacted by Dreier's massive $750 million fraud?
It had a huge impact on me. I mean, first of all, physically, I even had a rash on my skin that lasted for weeks, because it wasn't just the personal turmoil that happened. You have to remember, this happened in December, right at the end of the year, when certain bonuses were due to attorneys, non-contingent bonuses based on the fees that you had generated for that year. And also, it happened right before the holidays. So when your firm implodes and you have to think about transitioning your practice to a new firm, Christmas time is not
a good time.
No.
Not a good time to do that then. So, but in taking on this project, were you at all concerned that any of your personal feelings about your losses or your experience would find its way into the filmmaking process?
That would probably be my biggest concern, how my background baggage would affect my ability as a filmmaker. But I determined that my background history with Marc also allowed me to have the access that I could have to make the film, and that far outweighed the disadvantages. And I would say to my cinematographer, who was one of 3 people who were in house arrest with me filming, if you ever see me being soft, I was more concerned about not probing enough as opposed to being hurt. I was able to put that aside. I said, if you ever see me being soft or not following up, let me know and/or jump in yourself. So he was my check in that respect. So sort of, I had a check. Marc Dreier didn't have a check, but I did.
So how did you come to the decision to make Dreier the subject of a documentary?
Initially, I did not want to make this film. People talked to me about it both jokingly and seriously about, you have to make a film about this, as I was both a lawyer and a filmmaker. But I wanted to transition my practice to a new firm. My second film, called Nursery University, was being released. So I really didn't have the time to make this film. But after the dust had settled, I was settled in at my new firm. My clients of mine, who are also producers on this film, sort of came back to me and said, you're the only person who can make this film. And ultimately, I decided in 10 years' time, from this moment, if I didn't at least explore the possibility of making the film, that sort of would be always kicking me in the back of my head. So we explored the opportunity, and then that manifested into the film.
Well, we're glad you did. So tell us about your first day of filming with Dreier, your interaction with him. I mean, did he ever apologize for anything?
It's interesting. He certainly never apologized to me,
Okay.
as I was a victim, just like the rest of the 800 employees at Dreier LLP. So no, he never apologized. And the beginning of filming started out very expositive. It was fact-based. I wanted him to get comfortable with our process. So it took about a week or so until we got into the crimes and information that I thought would be more emotional. So I started with things like where he was born, how he grew up, his high school and college experience, things that were very favorable, to get him comfortable.
Well, and one of the things that I found most fascinating about the film is his frankness, the frankness in which he confesses to his crimes. I mean, I thought that it was truly a revelation to have him do that. But did you hope or did you expect that he might also be a bit more remorseful about committing them?
I really didn't know what to expect in terms of his emotional connection to what he did and him as a person. I'd always met him more in like the cocktail scenario, either as my boss or, at a cocktail party, people can be the life of the party, but they're not necessarily opening up in deep ways. So I was curious to see what his reaction would be. And what I learned is, he's very analytical, he's very intellectual, he's very intellectually connected to what he did, but he's not as emotionally connected to what he did.
Yeah, what's interesting is the only time that I think he shows any kind of emotion is when he talks very briefly about his mother's disappointment in him. Did you also find that interesting?
Anything that was connected to his family is when you would see the cracks in the armor, and he didn't want those cracks exposed, so that's when he would try to stop himself. I think that's the one element that he's connected to in terms of the damage he caused. He's a father, he's a son, and he's a sibling, and he knows that what he did affected those family members greatly, and he's emotionally impacted by that. I don't know if he's emotionally impacted by the damage he caused to the employees, the other hedge fund victims, et cetera, but certainly he connects to what he did to his family.
Interesting. Well, I wonder, as you know, creditors here for the law firm, the attorneys for the creditors, they actually said they question whether or not this film will do anything more than just sort of stroke Dreier's ego. What would you say in response to that?
And it was something that I talked to Marc about. Marc had a hard time understanding the benefit that might come from this film, and so it was something that I was always contemplating in making it. What I hope comes from making this film is, A, it serves as a cautionary tale. People who might step over the line in small ways or big ways, this hopefully, is a barometer for what happens when you do make that critical mistake and break the law. But also, it talks about values and reemphasizes the importance of morality in today's society, especially when someone like Dreier is really emblematic of the corporate and financial corruption that unfortunately has been, a bit of an epidemic lately. So I think the film has a lot of value in those respects, and it gives the public an opportunity to get inside the mind of one of these criminals. And everyone, you read about these stories and people say, what was that guy thinking?
Right, exactly.
And so now you have a chance to hear
exactly
what
was he thinking.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the Dreier that everybody knows and probably remembers is best illustrated in the clip that you brought with us today. Would you mind setting the clip up?
Sure. One of the very interesting facets of this film is that Marc Dreier was a very skilled attorney, and his criminal defense attorney is one of the best, Jerry Shargel. So when it came to the strategy of how to deal with his sentencing and try to ask for a lesser sentence than the government was asking, how to achieve that goal. And this is the two attorneys wrestling over what the best approach is.
Okay, so let's take a look at that clip.
So your argument is that you weren't so bad? I don't get it. On the one hand, you're saying you could make that point at the beginning, that we're not contesting the facts here and that the facts are particularly egregious. But what you want to go on to say after that is that what you did in the whole spectrum of what others have done ain't that bad. And I think if you do that, you're going to be. I'm listening, and you're.
I think you're. Bad. I said you're the one who's emphasizing the law. You don't have to use words bad, good, anything. Here are other cases. Here are the facts of those cases. Here are the sentences of those cases. Okay, based on those cases, we think we fit into 12 years. You don't have to say I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy. That's not my argument. If you don't tell them anything about my background, my case, my motivation, the number of my victims, how much people actually lost, and if you don't tell him anything about other cases, he's going to say, well, the government just stood up and said he's the devil. I've never heard anything else from anybody other than Mr. He's the devil. He gets the word. I don't understand
This is
it.
going to be the first time that you're before him on a sentencing, and it's not my first time. I've been there, and I don't want you. I know what you anticipate.
I anticipate he's going to slaughter me.
But if you get up there and say it's only 400 million as compared to others who have stolen more, you're going down a bad road with this judge.
It seems like he's pretty defiant here till the end, was he not?
I mean, there he's in lawyer mode, you know. So that's the one area where I do defend him, for lack of a better word, because he's trying to be his own lawyer. So if there are places where he's going to be sympathetic or trying to get some empathy or sympathy, that was not one area where he was looking for, because he was trying to, construct the best argument.
Obviously, and he's a great attorney. So, I mean, that certainly said. Well, I don't know if he's a great attorney, but he certainly is a skilled attorney, like you said. I think that's the best thing. By the way, I wanted to mention about the animation. I thought that the symbolism was so great in the movie. How did that come about?
Oh, thank you. That was one of the challenges. How are we going to demonstrate and show Dreier's past life when he's, narrating his own story? And the two factors that resulted in the choice we made were, one, I wanted something that was a heightened reality, because what Dreier was doing was unbelievable. And in his own mind, he was sort of making himself like a superhero. And so I wanted something that was a heightened reality. And the other aspect of it was his entire life was false.
Based on fiction.
It was all fiction. So I wanted something that would resonate with the public that was false, and graphic art. And this sort of, like I said, heightened reality represented that to me.
Well, in our remaining moments, I have to ask you about your path to becoming a filmmaker, and not just any filmmaker, an Oscar-nominated filmmaker. How did you get here?
In a backwards sort of way. In law school, I worked for the Innocence Project, which seeks to exonerate the wrongfully convicted, not the factually guilty, with DNA testing. And that was a real passion project for me. And I wanted to bring attention to the issues that the exonerees face. And I thought a documentary would be a very good way to do it. This medium, the film medium, I think can get a lot of attention. And so that resulted in my first film called After Innocence. And I wanted to show that that wasn't a fluke, so I made a second film. And then as a lawyer, my firm imploded, and here I was with a third film. So 10 years later, I have 3 films, and I'm still practicing law full time.
It's so interesting, though. So you never had an interest in film before?
No, I did. I did. I had an interest in film that started really materializing in college. I went to Penn and I started taking all the film courses I could, but I didn't really understand that there could be a profession there. And I even took some acting courses, and that actually gave me the tools to be a filmmaker, because I learned about character and storytelling and things like that.
So maybe someday see you on screen?
I was in a Spike Lee movie,
okay.
the 25th Hour, but I can't be an actor, lawyer, and filmmaker. So,
well, yeah, which brings me to my very last question. Do you think you'll ever give up the law someday and just pursue making movies full time?
Lately, I've been saying no, that this is my last film for a while, until I get a wife and a life in no particular order. I've been working a little hard.
Well, there are some of us who selfishly wish you will and do that at some point. But the great film again, Marc, thanks for joining us.
And I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
Marc Simon, director and producer of Unraveled. The film premieres April 13th in New York and Los Angeles. You can also get it on video on demand. For more information on this or other topics, subscribe to BloombergLaw.com, and you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody.